set your environment in a position where it's easy to make these things happen, where you're like, I need to go running tomorrow. Okay, well, I'm going to lay out my trainers. I'm going to put my socks over my trainers. I'm going to put my shorts there. I'm going to move my alarm across the other side of the room. I really think about how you can manipulate the environment to help your needs. And the same goes for people that want to do CrossFit as well. Make sure you have all the stuff in your bag, like your tape, your belt, your knee sleeves, your lifters, your chalk, all of it ready to go. So that when it comes to doing the lift on the day, you've got it all there and you're not going to go, oh, I ain't got my belt today, so I'm not going to squat.
They used to talk about exercising versus training. Most people exercise, they don't train. They go into the gym because they kind of feel like they should. They're maybe guilt tripped into it. Maybe they are just thinking, I've just gone past an hour in the evening or whatever it may be. But there's no plan, there's no goal, there's no nothing. And don't get me wrong, fair play. You're going into the gym, it's better than not. I understand that. But in order to make progression and in order to perhaps achieve goals that you may want to do so, you have to train. And training is very different to exercising. And it all goes back to exactly how you just summed it up really well there. It's having a plan, having a goal.
Hey folks, Rees here with RX Athletes, helping athletes become stronger, fitter, faster in the world of functional fitness. And I better tell you, I'm pretty fired up for today's podcast. Effectively, the Dave Castro of the British Army Warrior Fitness world. Of course, I'm talking about the one and only Ben Gilmore. Now, me and Ben's known each other for, forever, really, since we joined the Corps together. Starting REPTI course in 2014. At that time, I think CrossFit was kind of on its, on a bell curve. It was like on the rise, and we were both fully into it. I think most of our conversations were around how much can you snatch, what's your Fran time, so on and so forth, before we then trained together. And I think actually the whole of that course, most of the people on the course enjoyed doing CrossFit and training in that environment. So I think it was a good area and a good time to be going through that time at the school. Obviously, fast forward, we've come apart because we've been posted at different areas. He went to the school, I went to Sandhurst, and we lived a different sort of PT career or PT core career pathway. But since that happened, obviously, we've seen the inception of British Army Warrior Fitness, which Ben's obviously been a massive part of, whether that's competing or running the events or the programming for the actual workouts of the events. So I think today what it's going to be an insight knowledge about how the programming sort of works with both, a little bit of insight about what we can look forward to in the finals, and just really some general information about guys who want to improve their fitness, want to develop a bit more. But for the 3 people listening to this that doesn't know who Ben is, I'll let him introduce himself. So Ben, talk to me. I got you then.
Yeah, cheers for that. You summed it up pretty well there, mate. I mean, our journeys and our paths are together, and then when they're not together, they're sort of parallel. But my role, let's say, just to keep it British Army Warrior Fitness focused, just for a second, my role has been pretty much from the start line of transferring into the PT Corps in 2015, regional secretary business. And then stepping into the programming scene, running events, and now sort of heading up at secretary level for the Army, and overseeing the team series and the individuals as well. So, and I've done that for a number of years now. So, quite well versed in how the look and feel has evolved over these past few years, and how, which we'll talk about later on, how we want it to evolve over the coming years as well, just to keep ourselves relevant, keep ourselves current, and listen to people like yourself, like the athletes, who actually give us really valuable feedback at the end of each event, and it doesn't go unnoticed. And I think that people will be pleasantly surprised, not to give away too much too soon, but what's coming next year for the team series.
Yeah, I'm excited, and I think really that's some of the questions that really we got when we put it out to the community, where we've got most of them from, which was like, where's Borth right now? How did it come to this way? And sort of where are we going in the future? I think there's a few people who got questions, but it's great to hear that there is plans in motion, and that the right stakeholders are in the right position to make those changes. So I think that the first question I want to open with really is some of the community ones, and the first one is, from the programming to the organising, I mean, how do we get the actual beginners into these sort of BORF events? Is there like plans of play to make sure that we have that? Because obviously most of these events, as they've sort of evolved, progressed over
Yeah.
the years, you have a difference now between the guys who've been doing it for 5 to 10 years and the guys who are starting. How do we make sure that we tackle everything without obviously introducing a number of divisions? I mean, what's the plan with that?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Yeah. So what's been happening sort of the past couple of years, and it's certainly evolved over time, and it'll continue to do so, is the BORF training days. Lydia Hilson heads up that sort of style of work, and they're placed on several times a year. The season that's just gone, we've had 4 training days going on, and they're geared towards the beginners. It's a look at life almost type scenario. Scale everything back. Have a day, 2 days, whatever they can spare. And they just come in and almost like a gentle little feeder into it to show that it's not just for the elite athlete, and far from it. So those are the first sort of things I would definitely look to do if you are on the fence of doing it, or if you're new to it and just want to gain a little bit more experience and understanding. Those are the first things. But secondly, I would say that we've got to remember that the title of this is British Army Warrior Fitness. British Army Warrior Fitness. So what we do is we do try and cater to the masses, and noting that the cream will naturally rise to the top. And if you're a little bit quicker, a little bit more efficient, you're probably going to be able to move that load a little bit faster, gaining a better time, or an increased load. But what that does mean is it allows everyone to compete, and that's what we're really trying to do. Get everyone through the door, and naturally through the process of these regional events, we will sort of filter out those that naturally perform this movement or have had more experience within it. So a couple of different avenues there, but it's certainly open for the masses. I would definitely strongly suggest that.
Yeah, that's great. And I think those, I've personally been on one of them as a coach / athlete. I think they're well received, and to see the caliber of people that are turning up now, I mean, it's worlds ahead of where we were 10 years ago. There's obviously much more of an understanding about what this S&C business is. Like, obviously, we can appreciate where it's come from, where we're like scratching around, like, do you have a platform? There's like, can't drop the weights, and there was nothing really when you think about it. Back then, I think like 2013, there was like 3 comps in the UK, like London, Manchester, and divided we 4 in Cardiff, I think. And I mean, then you had like the inception of the Forces Throwdown and the Reebok CrossFit stores, and it was sort of like on this trajectory that was just like crazy, where it was just really big, really like, I don't know what you want to call it, like a cult following almost. But now it seems like it's the generic. People know what S&C are. People know what functional movements are. People are doing compound lifts. Like it's now entwined to what we do. There's no gone on the days where one position change, max exercises. I mean, still a time and place for that, but it's evolved, right? And you certainly notice that it's commonplace now. Certainly at these BORF training camps. What I'm interested in is the next element to this really is, how do you come up with the key components then, from obviously going from inception to training camp to then going, right, here's the open workouts for people to qualify, or vice versa, here's the team series 5 qualifying events. Is there a structure in the team event, as in, is event 1 easier than event 5?
There hasn't.
Go on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, if we look at the team series, and how that's been structured, certainly over the past few years, what we've looked at as a rule is that we would try and have 4 events on each regional workout, 5 regional workouts in total. So we're looking at 20 different workouts as our process. Within each one, we're trying to hit a component of fitness. So trying to hit a strength, trying to hit some form of aerobic, trying to hit some sort of anaerobic, and then trying to hit some sort of either a skill component, or let's call it a green orientated one. And we would try and factor all those into every one of the events. And I think we've done a really good process of that. And I think that that's been well received over the years. However, moving into next season, what we're going to try and do, or what we are going to do to keep ourselves current and keep ourselves more relevant, is to look at how other organizations are doing their work, and we look at High Rocks being a really one of those. We talk about trajectory and where they're at the moment, and listening to the athletes. So placing in different ideas from different brands effectively, and piecing that together. So that's what we're going to look for now. We're going to look at our team series workouts that are more geared towards each regional event. Is going to have a very different look and feel to how it's done of previously, and that's going to keep us and keep our athletes interested, and certainly test our athletes in very different ways than they've seen before. So those are going to come out very, very soon.
It's exciting to hear that. I guess that kind of leads into one of the other questions that we had on here, which was, is there going to see more skill and strength gymnastics orientated movements as we get to the finals of both the team series and the individuals? Is it likely to evolve in that process as well?
Yeah, it is. It is going to evolve, and you will have seen this from an athlete's perspective. Only a couple of years ago when we started to introduce the double under, introduce the toaster bar, things of that nature. And I think we have to remind ourselves that it's a gradual process. Now, of course, we've come a long way since the time, and we are going to continue to look to evolve. But stripping it back to your first question about getting maximum participation and trying to get almost a novice through the door without scaring them off, it's a really fine balance. And I think you'd be able to appreciate that, certainly when we look at open workout 1, team series, regional event 1, we want as many people through the door, capture as many people, get that real good feel factor, get that buzz for training, get that environment where everyone just wants to help each other, and we see that so much. And then the natural progression in skill component in a more arduous event can come later on through the line, and we'll see that only in a couple of weeks when we have the individual finals, and you'll see that through the regional events of 1 through to 5, followed by the finals as well. So a slight tweak, just turning the screw ever so slightly, just to keep people on their toes, keep people working, but noting that we still have to apply to the masses.
Yeah. I think that pretty much sums everything up. And I've just got a couple more questions before I finish this topic, and then we can go on to some other stuff. But the first one is, and a couple of people have asked the question, I've even suggested it as well, how come there's only a limited of 10 people in the finals? Surely with the scope of athletes now, there needs to be an extension in terms of, because effectively what we can see is athletes take a nosedive on an event and still win, because there's only a limited range they can drop down. Having 20 athletes on the shop floor definitely demonstrates a lot more versatility, especially when we're trying to test the fittest in the military, if you know what I mean. What do you think?
100%, and I can see that. I look at that from an athlete's point of view, and you've just put that point across, and you put it across really well. And I see it, and I understand it. Another way to look at it is that we're trying to place on the best events possible in the time frame that we've got, noting that this is not everyone's day job. We're lucky to get away on a Wednesday for one day, and we do have people traveling. I understand that, but our theory behind it, our aim behind it, is if that we have 10 people from the male, 10 female, and 5 male masters that we've got this year, is that we're going to be able to provide a better event for those 10 people. We can do things of a longer time frame than we would that if we had double the amount of people. So given the time constraints that we've got, and it's a 1-day event, we have opted this year to stick with the same theme of 10, 10 and 5, so that we can place on events which have a longer time frame, so that we can test the athletes and scrutinize their skill set a little bit more than we would if we had a larger style event. So that is the reason behind it, and I'm not going to say it's the only way to do it or the best way to do it, but that is our reasoning for it.
And that's completely understandable. And obviously, every time you make a change, there's always a pro and a con. There's always you've got to give something. I just think, and obviously, I'm talking from a selfish perception, is when you look at something like the CrossFit Games, where they do a mass event ever at the same time, endurance run or something where it's like 3, 2, 1, go. Um, that
Yeah.
interests me because you got the whole field there at once. There's only one heat effectively. You can make that event longer, and you cover everything then, don't you? Because you hit the endurance, everyone's done it at the same time, and it can be done in an hour. That would be quite inspiring for the girls to run against the guys, and the masters are involved as well. But then also, I think about like Athlete X, that new competition where it's kind of like a CrossFit race format. They've kind of merged the two. Where you maybe do the run and then you have like a 10-minute window and then you do a max lift. So effectively, you're hitting both the components together. Now, I don't know how that works in terms of the logistics of who takes the athlete once they've crossed the finishing line. Does everyone get the same amount of rest, or at 3, 2, 1, go, everyone moves onto a clean ladder, or does the first athlete start on the clean ladder first, or something like that? But maybe something where there's like a rolling clock to move into the second workout. And by all means, we can still do 2 generic heat-based event, but it'd be pretty cool to see something like that. Again, I'm spitballing ideas, but I think, like I said,
No.
go for it.
Go.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah. I think
mate.
I'm just spitballing ideas, but you said something in there right around the second question, which is the intention of the future, and you mentioned high rocks. So, do you see that being part of both in the future, or do you see that being its own sort of separate entity? And I'll finish up this question with this one: is do you see potentially them running together at the same time? You know, like both events this, and then in the middle there's like, I know we'll call it something else, let's call it both endurance event in the middle, and we'll see, and that way we can combine the two elements together. I think it would be pretty cool to see that, and obviously one set up then as well, but maybe that could be an interest. So you mentioned high rock soda. Is that the ambition to get it into the qualifiers or the
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Definitely, yeah. So at the regional level and team series level, and obviously we understand, as per CrossFit, and Hyrox is a brand, so we're not going to call it that. Like you say, both endurance or something similar would sit that within that stream perfectly. But you know, we've got to stay relevant. We've got to stay current. We've got to listen to people, and I see a programming this year, and you will see that this year. You will see an event where you'll have a strength component, and you'll also see a very long endurance-based workout performed as a team under the theme of, and if we use high rocks, it sort of narrows everyone's mind to what that really sort of can look and feel like. And I think that's going to be really, really cool to see. It's really cool, really different to how we've done it before, where we're kind of working within that somewhere 6 to 12 minute range. We're really going to push that boundary up towards the sort of 60-minute marker, and get people really pushing the pace on that. And I think it's going to be a really fantastic thing to see. And so, to sum up your question, yes, that's something that you're going to see in the future from a team series perspective. And noting that obviously our individual qualifiers have been done, and we're looking forward to the finals. That is something that you may see as well from an individual's perspective.
Amazing. I'm gonna shift gears a bit and talk a little bit more about Ben Gilmore. Ben Gilmore, the man, the athlete himself. So obviously, like I mentioned at the start, I've been doing it a long time, probably years before that as well. I mean, talk to us about your training at this point. Like, where you got to at this stage? Where did you start 10 years ago? Like, where are you right now?
Yeah. So, I mean, if I do roll back the years a little bit, it was not too long before our APTC transferring course that I really got involved with functional fitness. Maybe a couple of years, give or take, and it was only over the back of realizing how bad I was at it. Having the very soldier like, let's call it, from yesteryear fitness. I was good at aerobic conditioning. I could run really far, and I could carry a burger wherever you wanted me to. However, first time I tried to overhead squat, even just a PVC pipe, it looked something special. So yeah, got into that really got on the bandwagon and trained really, really hard. And you know, we ended up doing some competitions together, didn't we? Which was those were fantastic days. I saw the pictures that you posted the other day, and yeah, bring back great memories, to be honest. And continued that forward. You know, really, really enjoy that style and method of training. Where we're at today, you know, I have a sport which takes priority. So I've really found jiu-jitsu really beneficial for me as a person. Putting together this puzzle, which is unattainable to do so, and you know, for me, I just find it a fantastic sort of release of mindset as well. But back in the gym, I still follow the principles and methods of an S&C program. You know, I like the barbell, I like kettlebells, I like dumbbells. I use a clock on the wall to hold me accountable for a time. I throw in conditioning workouts of varied, whether it be EMOM or interval or for time, and that will never leave me. I've perhaps shifted slightly my focus to being better on the mats, and I use my S&C to complement my sport.
Amazing. And you know, you just mentioned there about your training not really adjusting more than changing too much. What would you say is the first things or the elements that you've dropped off of the old your old previous training? Which ones did you go, you know what, that's a CrossFitism, I don't really need that anymore? Has you got anything?
Yeah, for me, yeah, there is, and it's perhaps chosen because I wasn't very good at it, and that's more so the complex gymnastic work. That could be dropped quite easily because you know, it never came to me as a natural skill set. So I kind of just narrowed my field a little bit to what is going to make me better at the thing that I like to do. So I think I had that mindset of a filter process of, you've got an exercise range of 1,000 different things and variants of what you can do. Performing 1,000 things well is very, very difficult. So I just narrowed that down to probably about 10 to 15 movements, which I really, really like. And which I can see value in, which I can see progression within, which still give me enough varieties to keep me happy. But their purpose is to make me fitter, stronger, and faster, so that I can perform my chosen sport really well. But notwithstanding that I'm also still in the military, and I still have to perform at a certain level as well. And I pride myself in being able to do that as well.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think that actually, I think a lot of people who get into this sort of training, they see all the fancy stuff from the CrossFit Games, or they watch maybe people on Instagram, the highlight reels, so to speak. And I think actually what you just said there, with, you know, you've got a key 10 to 15 movements that actually pretty much everyone in the world should be doing, really. And there's different stages about how they're doing it. But you like you just said there, these are like functional movements to be a human being, you know, and then probably an extension of that, there's maybe a handful more that are relative to the military. And I think that's a really good point. I think if you focus on those core, let's say 20 movements within your movements library, now you can adjust them. You can do tempo, you can do intensity, you can do heavy, you can do light. There's so many ways to cause a stimulus or create that adaptation within the body. But I think you're right. There is some of these just movements that are kind of like a must. What would you say off the top of your head is probably like top 5 that you would say every person, like if I was just an average Joe now going to the gym, like, you know, I should be focusing on these 5 movements. You got any into mind?
Yeah, I mean, squat and squat patterns. You know, I'm very much into at the moment my sort of unilateral movements. I think they just give me more bang for buck. So I do enjoy getting a heavy barbell on my back, and of course there's no substitute for that. But for me, sort of like a back rack reverse lunge, or kettlebell variants, dumbbell variants are just absolutely fantastic for me. And like you say, certainly if I'm short on time as well, when we look at what that's going to give me in terms of my strength and coordination and balance core control and awareness of where my body is in time, that's going to be right up there. And again, it doesn't change too much when we look at the upper body. Rather than sitting under a bench press for myself, I'll use kettlebell variants, dumbbell variants, or attached in those two items to a barbell, but with a band, again, to provide that instability to the load effectively. And if I look at the transfer of skill of what I'm doing in the weight room, for example, to my chosen sport, and if we just look at jiu-jitsu, it's very almost odd objecty when you look at the human body. When you look at so many different bodies that you're having to sort of roll with, and they're moving in a way which sometimes you don't have control over, those for me are going to give me the best force production so that I can, achieve what I want to do on the mats. So absolutely, the lower limb unilateral, upper limb unilateral, and variants of, and then simple conditioning, mate. Simple conditioning, not overcomplicating things. I'll go out for steady runs over a long period of time. I'll perform some assault bike intervals, ski erg, rower, or any variant of those. And I'll get some non-impact work in as well, some yoga, a bit of swimming. My training is certainly less complicated than it used to be, and there's quite a freeing nature to that, and it although from the listening to that it may sound very simple and potentially could get boring. There are, like you say, there are so many different variations of so minimal amount of movements that you can keep that interesting over a prolonged period of time.
Yeah, that's pure gold. I think that's going to be really good for the people listening, just about keeping it simple. And if anything, even if you wanted to transition and go, you know what, I'm going to actually tip my hat into a both event like you did last year, team series, like, it might be the year before, you're like, right, I'm going to go back into now and compete for the team. That platform is still there because you're doing functional movements, because your body is still responding and maintaining what it's currently got. It's not hard to then transition and go, you know what, now I'm going to focus a little bit more specific. I'm going to add these extra elements in that are probably a bit more functional fitness, both CrossFit related, but you've already got the foundations. And there was something you said there as well about roll on the mat. I think it was in Dan John's course. He talks about this like anaconda strength, where you're like grabbing a D ball, you're like holding kettlebells, you're like, what muscle group you're working? Well, actually, you don't really know, but it's your back, it's your core, it's just like this thickness to your body that will generally make you stronger across everywhere. And I think about like the course that Major Dan Brown, like lifting these stones and stuff. But it actually, there's something about these movements, and you talked about unilateral stuff, that just generates some sort of stimulus in the body where you're just quite tough and a bit stronger and a bit more robust. So if you did need to go out there and put a Bergen on, or if you did need to go and do a hard Murph event, you can still do it and you can still pivot. And I think that's almost, you're kind of in this threshold where you're just in a good position where training's not too difficult to get done, but you're still enjoying it, and you're still in a position where you can attack if you want to. If you want to go on that 3-month, 12-week focus on weightlifting, you can certainly do that, and it won't take you long to get those numbers back. And I'd finish up with that one with just saying, I think you mentioned most of the stuff that would be in my top 5. I'd say some sort of deadlift and a squat, like you said, just because it's purely time under tension. The load, the stimulus you're going to get is going to be massive in terms of, one, strength adaptation, but 2, like testosterone response, like growth hormone. You're just going to get a lot of benefits from doing those compound lifts. You think about how much muscles actually working during those movements as well. You've got your synergists, abductors, you've got stabilizers all working, plus you're developing some sort of CNS resistance, mental fatigue, and that. And then I'd probably say rowing as probably a staple, really, because it can hit all the different areas of all the different zones of cardiovascular fitness. You can do long, you can do short, you can do hard, you can do fast. But it's also very good in the fact that it's not impact, and it's actually probably going to allow you to maintain muscle mass, whereas running, if you do too much running, that's not going to be very good to maintaining muscle mass. And then, I'll probably do like a pull up, maybe a pull up, maybe a dip, something like that. I think a dip's probably better than bench
Yeah.
if I was gonna just do one movement as like a top five. But I think
Yeah.
that's where I would be at. I mean, that mine's probably a little bit more simple, but
Mm.
I'm not talking about any sport here. I'm just talking about if you was like going to the gym. If you're doing those 5 movements, like I just said there, I think you'd probably be in a good state, where you can tell it's kind of like that mix between strength and like kinesthetics, like with rowing on top. So
Yeah.
what do you think about that? Anything like that sound about right?
Yeah, for me, it's literally just nodding the whole way through because I couldn't agree more, and I really like what you're saying as well about the just building that platform and making that platform. You're making this platform not only longer, but you're making it thicker. You're really building up a real robustness there throughout all of your body, and then, like you say, if you want to dive into something sport specific, you want to do some BORF, etc., and you just think, I know double unders or toaster bar might be coming in, or I know that this might be coming in. You know that your foundation is super strong, and all you've got to do is just sharpen that axe just a little bit closer to the time, a little bit of dialing, a little bit of communication, a little bit of awareness of what's going on, but you're in such a great place to do that because your foundations are all hit, and you like say you can't build the building without the foundations, and it's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Most
Yeah,
important
I
thing.
completely agree, and I think that's probably, if I was gonna nitpick about the people that I see getting into this sort of training or going to the gym for the first time, I feel like they're doing it the opposite way around. And I just think you could probably get way more benefit by
Mm,
just doing a simple free lift powerlifting 12-week cycle and just getting stronger. And then from there you can then add the plyos in and the power work and add the weightlifting in, and then from there you can look at adding the gymnastics in and just work about that starting from the bottom and just getting really strong. It will just help you so much in terms of mobility, flexibility.
yeah.
It just make all these movements so much easier.
Yeah.
I won't go on to this for
Yeah.
too long,
Absolutely.
but I think this goes into my next question, which is kind of like, I think there's 2 levels to it. We've got the guys going from 0 to 1,
Mm,
who are just starting out. They're walking into the gym. They're looking at the machines and they're just copying the description on the machine. They don't really know what they're doing. They're probably just going to do 3 sets of 10.
yeah.
No sort of control about weight. No rest pattern. They're probably just scrolling Instagram between sets. And to be fair, they're coming out of the gym pretty deflated because they haven't really done much. For those guys going to 0 to 1, we've talked a little bit about the foundational movements. You got any other tips for those guys?
Get a training buddy. Get a training buddy will be my first one. If you can get someone within your section or however that sort of looks and feels that applies to your work stream, get a training buddy and work something out together. Get a little plan in place. That would be my first tip. Second one, speak to someone who you may admire within that cohort of people or that sort of position which you're trying to get to. Advice and experience, you can't sort of buy that. You need to hear certain things from the right people. So get someone to do it with and speak to someone who you may admire or you may look up to within that field would absolutely be my first two. There's so much knowledge online that it can be a little bit of a rabbit hole. So not to say that is a bad form and everything's at the touch of your fingers. But sometimes face to face communication is probably a little bit lacking now, I would suggest. So those would be my two that come to mind straight away. Although I'm sure that there's a million other
Yeah, I
ways.
think they're brilliant, actually, to be fair. And it's more about that accountability, sort of intrinsic motivation, those
Mm,
areas there that I think you're touching on. For me personally, I think if I was going to advise someone, I think, and I get this, and I'm not taking full credit from it because probably a lot of it's from Atomic Habits, although I can't actually remember the direct quotes from it. But within that book, they say about sorting your environment out. And what that means is, and I think there's
mm,
another one about tidy your room or something like this. There's other these quotes and stuff. But I think is you've got to set your environment in a position where it's easy to make these things happen, where you're like, I need to go running tomorrow. Okay, well, I'm going to lay out my trainers. I'm going to put my socks over my trainers. I'm going to put my shorts there. I'm going to move my alarm across the other side of the room. I'd say like really think about how you can manipulate the environment to help your needs. And the same goes for people that want to do CrossFit as well. Make sure you have all the stuff in your bag, like your tape, your belt, your knee sleeves, your lifters, your chalk, all of it ready to go. So that when it comes to doing the lift on the day, you've got it all there and you're not going to go, I ain't got my belt today, so I'm not going to squat. That is, to me, I used to fall foul this all the time because I'd be like swapping bags out or doing something like that. And I realized that it massively, just the one day fine, but this will massively affect your training if you don't have stuff. Just last week, my grips broke. I didn't have no grips. The next day I went in there, I was like, right, I'm going to do some toes to bar or I'm going to do some, and I didn't have my grips there. And the bars I got to work, by the way, are really terrible. They're like really thick and you need grips to actually like do any movements on them. And I didn't have them. And I just went back to that thought, like, set your environment, and that means your kit as well, so that it's least resistance when it comes to actually doing the task. And it will just make it a little bit easier. I say that's the first one. The second one, if I was just going to have two, was, and this probably goes back to, I think Arnie probably said this, was have a plan. And like he said, you know, it could be a holiday. It could be an image of who you want to look like. It could be a competition you want to compete at. But have that plan in your mind so that when you're going to train, you know what you're doing it for. And effectively, if you're point A right now and you're moving towards point B, all you've got to do is close the gap in the middle. And that just means establishing the difference between the two points within that map. And I'd say, like, if my point B is over there and they're benching 140 and I'm over here benching 80, then I know that I've got a 60 kilo deficit. What will naturally happen is that you'll start making changes within your training to accommodate that deficit. And you'll start prioritizing the biggest deficits within your training to go, right, I'm the furthest away from this person because of my aerobic capacity, because of my body fat percentage, etc., etc. And you could take this into any environment you want. You want to call it bodybuilding, you want to call it CrossFit, whatever you want. I think it's in establishing those two key areas is where you are right now and where do you want to go. And the only reason you can work that out is if you have a plan about where you're going to go. Anything else you want to add on that one?
Well, mate, it just that's the one there. And I used to have this this phrase when I was delivering on the PTI course at the PT school several years ago. I used to talk about this, and you made reference to the guys that are, you know, or the guys and girls that may be going into the gym doing 3 sets of 10 of something on a machine because that's the machine that's free, and then they're going to wander over there. Da, 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 da. And I used to talk about exercising versus training. Most people exercise, they don't train. They go into the gym because they kind of feel like they should. They're maybe guilt tripped into it. Maybe they are just thinking, I've just gone past an hour in the evening or whatever it may be. But there's no plan, there's no goal, there's no nothing. And don't get me wrong, fair play. You're going into the gym, it's better than not. I understand that. But in order to make progression, and in order to perhaps achieve goals that you may want to do so, you have to train. And training is very different to exercising. And it all goes back to exactly how you just summed it up really well there. It's having a plan, having a goal, understanding where you are, point A, understanding where point B is, and putting your little check markers on along that route as well.
Love it, mate. And I think that goes into the second part of this question, which is probably just an extension of what we've already talked about. But I'll go first so you can have a chance to think of an answer. But it's the guys that are already training, and then, you know, on that scale, that imaginary scale of 1 to 10, you know, 0 being someone who's never trained, 10 being Matt Fraser, tier 2 me, like the fittest person in the world. And they're like on a 5 or 6, you know, maybe they've done CrossFit classes, maybe they're winning the boxes scores, maybe they're at a point now where they're looking at individual training, they need to do some sort of progressive overload. What tips would you give them to make that step to the next? Where's the next step for them? What changes or processes do they need to start doing now to go, right, I'm no longer this novice person who's recreationally training in a CrossFit class. because that's what it happens. It can only take you so far, right? And then they've gone, right, now I'm going to train and I want to
Yeah.
compete in the French throwdown. I want to get to, etc. And I'll give you a sec to think about it. I mean, to me, this comes down to
Yeah.
it comes down to two things really, and that's consistency and effort, which is continuously doing what you need to do um, at the required effort level. And they kind of work in like an affinity loop. But what does that mean? That basically means that in order for me to be consistent, I need to make sure I've slept well. In order for me to put the effort in, I need to make sure my nutrition's on point. And so I'm talking here from a bigger sense of purpose here, but if you haven't dialed in your sleep, if you haven't dialed in your nutrition, how much consistency and effort are you going to be able to put in over a long trajectory of time? Because as you get higher up in these numbers, these theoretical numbers, the gap for slacking off or the gap for doing something that's not moving towards your goal, because you're either doing something that does move you towards it or takes you away from it, becomes very narrow, and it becomes very easy to go,
Yeah.
if you the better you get, the more you cannot have those mistakes, you cannot have those limitations, so you need to be so dialed in with all this stuff. So yeah, consistency and effort is the ones. And how do we do that? Well, go back to those other points. You set your environment right. You have the best food in the house. You buy fresh groceries. You have the best steaks in the fridge. You count your macros if you need to count your macros. You get rid of all the fast food. You stretch off after you train. You follow some sort of, and I could just name off a load of things there. You're doing ice baths. You're monitoring your sleep, etc., etc. Because what that will allow you to do is optimize your recovery in order to train again, in order to hit that effort level again. That's what I'd say. That's the difference between being a novice and then moving up to those advanced levels. Anything else you could add on that?
Yeah. Really, really like that, mate. Really like that. I suppose rather than repeating what you've just said, but in a different way, there's perhaps another couple of different angles you could look at as well. One is put yourself out your comfort zone. Maybe enter that competition. Really go for it. I noticed my almost my hunger and my drive and my application to training came when I set myself like, right, well, this qualifier is happening. Right, I've made the qualifiers. I'm into the finals now, and I put myself in a bigger pond. I made, I'm this big fish in this little pond in the CrossFit gym that I'm in, and I win every workout without trying. But now I'm going against the fittest people in the UK and all that. So I found that really spurred me on to train hard. And I didn't dial off after that as well. Once I'd made it to these, quite big events within the UK, Battle of the Beast and, British Championships and these kind of things, I made it there. Although I was happy to be there, I was never competing for the podium spot. So I would then reflect on that. Okay, I've finished 30th out of 100. Okay, what do I need to do now to make it so that next year I can finish 25th, for example? So opening your field a little bit would be one. And this is something that I did sort of on reflection of that, which tied in hand to hand, was I wrote down every single movement that I could think of, categorized it into, say strength, and we have back squat and all the ollie lifts, all this, all that. I wrote them all down, and I give myself a realistic score from 0 to 10. 10 being, I am absolutely amazing. That, 0, I can't even do it. And I was honest with myself. I wrote it down, and that dialed my training in just a little bit more and allowed me to make the progressions in certain areas where I wanted to make those. So I could sort of self-program effectively if you have the ability to do so. And it dialed me in. Not always the most fun when you're trying to beat your head against the wall, trying to do things that you can't do. But unfortunately, sometimes in order to progress, you have to do things that you don't particularly want to do in order to see those markers and those numbers on that scale move up. So those are, two different ways which I've done it over the time, underpinned by those two principles that you've said there are just perfect.
Yeah, I love that, and that really goes back to our point of like you just said there. I mean, you just worked out where you are right now, right? And then you said on a map, where is it out of 10, 10 being the point B, so to speak. And then I guess this is probably how I program for
Yeah.
people in a way, is I work out those deficits and then I put them in an order of go, well, this is the biggest deficit.
Mhm.
This is the biggest weakness you have in terms of where you want to be.
Yeah.
And this is the one that doesn't need
Mhm.
much topping up, right? And then when you're working out your programming, then you can work out
Mm.
your movements library, and then you can work out which components of fitness are you likely to attack, what you're going to do first in the day, what you're going to prioritize in the week. And this is where it starts. This is like the basis of writing a good program. And obviously, a program does take you
Course,
from A
mate.
to B. Maybe it doesn't take you all the way there, but it will get you
Yeah.
closer, and then you can relook at it and do a comp or something like that. Yeah, I love that, mate. That's brilliant. And I don't want to take too much of your time, so just while I finish up with a couple of last questions, mate, is what would you say was a a significant purchase you've made in the last 12 months that's been a bit of a game changer for, I don't know, a couple £100, and you were like, I can't believe I didn't have this sooner? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Okay. Give me 10 seconds just to run through my
Yeah,
purchases, mate.
I'll let you think about it. To me, I've got three that come to mind. First one being I bought the AirPod Pro 2s from Apple, and I never really a big earphone guy. Just put the music on the speaker. It's a bit obnoxious, obviously, to do that in a JD Sports Globo gym. So I've got to buy the earbuds, but actually holding them in at work with silent mode, noise cancellation, absolute game changer. And I love them. I like wear them all the time. So if you haven't got a pair, and obviously you can buy whatever pair you want, but noise cancelling headphones at the moment are just the way to go. I'd say the second one recently is not that recent, but I gotta say is the Victory grips. Unbelievable. If you're struggling with holding the rig, toes to bar, chest to bar, even muscle ups, get yourself a good pair of grips. And I've tried a few, and some I'd say okay, some are just absolute dog shit that you just slide off the bar. Better to use your skin, to be honest. But these ones, absolute game changer. They're expensive. They're like 60, 70 quid, but they're worth the money. If you ask me, they're worth the money. Stuck to the bar. They've got a new version where it goes around your wrist. Absolute game changer. Can you think of anything that comes to mind? Mine are pretty too expensive ones, but can you think of anything?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, a decent set of knee sleeves. And I've had my Ray-Ban knee sleeves now for quite some time. Unfortunately, when I wash them, they still have a certain smell, but that's work ethic that's put through them more than anything. So yeah, I think you've got to find out obviously where your budget is with certain things. Like you talk about those grips. I've got a set of those grips as well. Incredible. I've got a set of really good lifters as well, which are just phenomenal. But these kind of purchases make all the difference, and if it makes 1% better and makes you feel better sometimes, and sometimes it could just be a feeling, they're literally worth
Yeah,
their weight in gold.
completely agree.
The
And
AirPod one,
just to add on to what you just said, I've got the
unbelievable.
same knee sleeves, but the like you just
Yeah.
said, they're having these little purchases. It just helps your environment. Like I said before, it's setting your environment. It's putting you in a good mood. It's making you train. It's making it easier to get there, get to the gym, and you're enjoying your session more because you're not there. You're not then thinking about your hands. You're not thinking about your knees. You're just cracking on with the stuff you need to do. And yeah, you've got to spend a bit more money, but have those decent earphones in, listen to the music, motivate yourself, or have those grips on your hands and actually do the sets that you need to do, sets of 15 to 20, rather than slipping off the bar and doing tens and then getting frustrated. And then, you know what I mean? And then it's just all this stuff. We're talking about longevity, we're talking about marginal gains, but it makes so much difference. Sort your environment out, sort your training items out,
Yeah.
spend a little bit of money. It's worth it in the end. I think it's good advice. And I think you said something there about, yes, it's hard and overcoming adversity, but if it wasn't hard, you wouldn't do it because it wouldn't be enjoyable. That's the challenge. That's why people want to do stuff like CrossFit, because there's a challenge, there's a pursuit. That's why, jiu-jitsu has such a following at the moment, because it's like a never ending pursuit to be better. And there's obviously different levels, and it's like you think
Yes.
you've done something, you've unlocked something, yeah, you're a black belt, and then there's another unlock afterwards. There's always something, and us as humans, we constantly need to be evolving. We need that edge, and that's why these things, jiu-jitsu, CrossFit, both, whatever you want to call it, there's almost no end goal. The end goal really is the journey itself, is enjoying the process of improving yourself, not to compete against other people, really. That's the fun part. It's competing against yourself to be better. And if you get into that momentum of that constant wheel, I think you feel better for it. Me personally, when I jump off the wheel, I feel terrible. 1-2 weeks in of like not eating right,
Yeah.
not training, not focusing on my hydration, not sleeping right. I don't know how people operate like that. I literally think to myself, do people walk around like this? Because I feel absolutely terrible. And then as soon as you get back into the structure of eating well, training well, developing, having a good community aspect, and you're sort of moving forward, you feel a completely different person. Would you agree?
Mate, that is literally it. I mean, we get one body, don't we? We get one body, and we sort of get one crack at it. And I completely agree. Movement is medicine. Keep yourself on that wheel, and absolutely, of course, rest is important. Of course, it is. But just keep yourself going, keep yourself driving, surround yourself with those right people, make your environment good. Look after yourself physically, look after yourself mentally, and the two just combined there just set you in such a good place. I often used to say that even if I'd had a somewhat bad day at work, if I'd had a good training day, I'd had a good day. And I really sort of still stand by that. That if I can, get on the mats for an hour, throw a bit of weight around, move my body around for the day, I'm pretty content there. I feel like I can take on so much more from a work perspective, a family perspective, or friendship, or whatever it may be. Those kind of things.
Yeah.
Training is almost the gatekeeper bit for me for longevity of many other processes in my life.
Mate,
well.
I love that, and I completely agree with everything you just said. I want to finish one last question, mate, before you go, and that is, we're both moving on in our years now. 37. You 37 as well? Yeah. Have you noticed what's been the
I'm 38.
what's the biggest changes you've seen in terms of how you've approached training? Any differences you've noticed about how you now need to adapt? We talked about a few things there that probably tie into this, but can you add anything more about the guys that are probably getting a little bit older? Have you noticed anything different?
I think the biggest noticeable one for me, and it's very almost stereotypical, is that I probably just take a little bit longer to warm up now. I do remember 10 years ago, you can just get the barbell out, chuck the blues on, and I'll sling it around. Don't worry about it. Whereas now I do just take a little bit longer. And I just think, you know what? I'll take an extra 5 minutes there, and that is me looking after my body there a little bit more, because I want to go into the gym tomorrow and train, and I want to go in next week and train, and I want to go in next year and train. So for me, just taking a little bit longer in the warm up phase is going to be massively beneficial for me. And the second biggest one for me is sleep. I sort of was able to operate on minimal sleep before without seemingly much impact. Whereas now I do notice that. I notice that if I've not had a decent sleep the next day, lethargic, feel a sort of stiffness and a tension within my body, and again that leads to it's not just physical, then it's psychological, of thinking about it, and it's a negative sort of spiral and circle that goes within there. So for me, the two biggest hitters would be I take a long time to get there, but once I'm there, I'm all good, and I need a little bit of shut eye. And with those two combinations, I'm there or thereabouts, good to go. What about yourself?
Completely agree with those two, and I've certainly noticed it. I just add one on to the end of that, and that's to say the drop off when you stop training is a lot quicker, as in your strength numbers seem to drop faster than they did before. Maybe you step out of doing any back squats for a couple of weeks. For some reason, your body's like, I don't need to squat anymore, and it just goes very fast. I'm probably saying very fast, but faster than it did before. I felt like you maintained a lot longer before. You could switch sideways and do something else, then come back and you'd be the same numbers Now there's a bit of a drop off. Equally, the comeback takes longer. So that muscle memory comeback, that work you need to come back to where you were, takes longer. I've just noticed those two things. Apart from that, like you just said there, the sleep, 100%. And now and again, I definitely need to rest more than I did before. I mean, I was doing like watch Rich doing when I was at Sandhurst, and I'd do like 2, hour and a half sessions, and I'd do that every day. That would kill me now. Not because, I can't do it, but it's the performance I'd be putting out. It wouldn't be worth it. And I think that comes with experience as well. And that's one of the benefits of being a little bit older, is you can do what you just said there, warm up and know that actually I'll get more by warming up for 5 minutes than I will by lifting right now. And you sort of know these things a little bit more. And that's why, funnily enough, I haven't really got injured for a while. Touch wood. But mate, really appreciate it. I think everyone's going to love this conversation. I think there's some absolute nuggets here for everyone. Much appreciated, mate. And thanks for the call. I know you're probably a busy man. Cheers, buddy.